I'm Geremy Reiner. Briefly said this earlier. I've been in the IT industry for almost 25 years now. Actually, it's 26. I'm dating myself a little bit. The gray beard shows it off anyway, so it's fine. I started out as a sysadmin, like a lot of us back in the double aughts in 99, right? Quickly turned into a developer. Now, funny part is I actually started as a music education major in college. Frankly, I just wanted to change the world by bringing better arts to the children in the world. I wanted to teach high school orchestra. That was my dream. Found out I couldn't make any money at it, got into IT. Common story in IT. But that core of wanting to change the world, and not in big ways, right? I'm not going to solve world hunger. We're not going to create world peace. Frankly, I'm not going to find the best way to get clean drinking water to everybody in the world. But I knew I could make small changes everywhere I went. And that's what we do in IT. It's what we do best, in fact. We make small changes, incremental changes, day after day, week after week, year after year, to create something huge that never goes away. Now, for the last 10 years, I've been working in consulting firms, small, medium ones, helping them get better aligned with partners like AWS and Azure and find ways to deliver better for our customers and help do it more effectively. And that doesn't just mean delivering better code, but doing it at a better cost basis. Because frankly, consultants are way too expensive for the companies that hire them. So we take a lot of different ways to do that. At modernization, biggest buzzword in the world, something we've been doing since the double aughts as well. It's really just custom app development with a slightly different approach. Now, I'm gonna start this story a little bit differently because this happened in a time where nothing was really happening in consulting and IT unless you were trying to get remote workers enabled. Because in 2020, March of 2020, one of my old contacts, traditional CEO that jumped between companies every 5 years or so, gave me a call and said, hey, I'm taking a new job. There's this company called VYNE. They make a product that's really cool. It's called Trace. Does all these communications managements for solutions for big healthcare groups and hospital groups. So you think of the Northwestern Hospital Group, right? Locations all over the place. CHS literally has hospitals everywhere. They use this kind of product to make it so that they can get better communication to their patients, manage authorization processes through Medicare and Medicaid, insurance, take all the communications that come in from various sources, put it in one place, track it, log it, manage it, and communicate with it, right? They've got a product that they've been building for almost 20 years dedicated to this. She goes, I'm going into this new company and I need two things. First is I promised the board we would be cloud native at the end of next year. Great, we can help you with that. I run a cloud consultancy, not a problem. Two, we need to bring our operating costs down because it costs us way too much to run these platforms. It's about a dozen servers that get installed on-prem at the hospitals. It's a pain in the butt, just way too expensive. All right, we can probably do something there, at least in the roadmap, get you to a point where we can consolidate, make it more effective. And three, I need to get onboarding done faster. Right now, from the day a new hospital signs on with us to the day they can start using our product is about 6 months. Which I had this look, right? My eyes are wide. I'm like, how does it take 6 months to get something implemented? Now, don't get me wrong, compliance, security, architect review, that can take time. That's not included in that 6-month time frame she gave me. That's from the moment their technologists get the approval to start installing things to the moment that people can start using it. We had to make that better. So not a problem. I'm going to get a whole bunch of my smart guys in the room with your really smart guys. We're going to figure out your product, understand it a little bit better, get the scope of this thing. We'll get you a plan put together. sat down with them, and over 3 days, 8 hours each, we went through everything from the architecture to a demoed install to the way that people use it. My guys, bless them, recorded every session, had all of the intent to go back to the office and start tearing into this thing, putting together proposals, figuring out how to deliver it faster. At the end of the third day, I looked at the CEO and I just went, you know, this isn't going to happen as fast as you want. And frankly, you're going to end up spending $10 million, and I can't even promise an outcome if we do anything with this product. It's too complex. There's too many servers in it. There's way too many integrations that are built on old C++ code to even try to do anything on this. We need to look at your application and find a better way of delivering it. She goes, I was afraid you were going to say that. And then I looked at her and I'm like, you know what? The one thing I realized, I forgot to ask you a very important question before we got all of your people in the room and all of my guys in the room. Why are we doing this? Yes, we have 3 outcomes we want to hit. We need to move to the cloud. Great. Why do you want to move to the cloud? We need to make it less complex so that it's easier to install, faster to manage, easier to get out from after the contract. But why? There's a cost basis to that. But how does it serve your customers to do that? That got us into the right conversations. The real goal and what she promised the board, we need to go after the mid-market doctor's offices, the clinics, and the clinician groups. They don't need this huge product that does all this stuff with an EHR implementation. They're looking for something more simple. They're looking for better engagement with their patients. This concept in healthcare, patient centricity, has been around forever. But delivering on it was what she really wanted to promise. And they wanted to do that for every doctor's office in America. And they wanted to do it in the next 3 months. So what was important out of this old solution that they had built was the communication management, authorizations management, and denials management. Those are the 3 biggest things that can help a doctor's office perform more effectively and really get in with their patients and start delivering better care. So we went back to the drawing board. If we just take those 3 pieces, communications management, denials management, and authorization management, can we build a product in 3 months in the cloud that's cost effective, consumption modeled, and a pricing model that they can sell to new customers? This is how we pitched it and what we usually do. And mind you, if you're working with a consulting firm and they don't have something like this, or if you work at a consulting firm, you don't have something like this, please steal it. I tell every consulting firm I work with and I consult for, having some sort of no cost basis to go in and understand the business drivers first and the objectives that you're going after before you start building is critical. I love agile frameworks. We deliver on them all the time. That is how my teams operate. Without that first section, understanding the business and technology review, none of it will be successful because you're always building to something of an unknown. Making sense so far? I'll pause there. Yeah, we got some thumbs up. I like it. The big piece here, making sure that you understand those objectives, and I failed on that, mind you, right? At least I caught myself before we started putting hands on keyboard. But understanding it and then building toward it is kind of the key. And that's exactly what these guys did. So over a series of 14 weeks, we took all of that old code and old process management, communications management solutions that were built into that monolithic product and peeled them away. Took them out, refactored them, brand new .NET Core. Mind you, the guys did everything they could to make sure that this thing was modeled as future-proof as possible, which we know is impossible. They tried, but it's built on Lambdas, S3, basic step functions, and frankly, they did a fantastic job at it because there's not much to the architecture itself. API gateways, basic security, and everything built very simply and as cloud native technology basis as possible. Interesting part though is in those 14 weeks, they were doing a showcase every 2 weeks. That product was being shown off and they had that first interface available already in the second week that we started working. Imagine that. Those conversations with the CEO occurred over about 3 weeks, from the day she called me to the day we finally got to a point where I had an approach in front of her and said, we can deliver this, and this is what's going to cost you. Mind you, I will give you that punchline so that you understand what a product development should cost you. But it was 3 weeks from start to finish there. And then from the day that she signed the contract, 14 weeks later, she had a working MVP, minimum viable product. Mind you, not production ready necessarily, basically scalable because it's in Lambdas and S3, right? You've got the basic redundancy built into everything, but it hasn't been pressure tested by users. Basic unit testing is already built in, et cetera. But it's an MVP. You don't go full featured on everything. Built that product in 14 weeks. Punchline is they monetized it in the 16th week. 2 brand new clients and customers. Those mid-market doctor's offices and clinician groups signed up 16 clinician groups or 16 doctor's offices and a clinician group. That's huge. A new revenue stream based off of one project. Beyond that, we started creating add-ons. They realized that this is the application modernization story that they wanted to approach. Take the old functions and features of Trace, recreate them by taking that code out of it and building it on this new platform that was already integrated with identity management, global identity management, in this case through Okta and Ping Identity, already secured and built out with compliance regulations. Very simple stuff to do with AWS. I'm not going to preach on that. I think there's 2 sessions happening today talking about it anyway. And very easily scalable because all we're doing is building additional Lambdas and making sure the API gateway itself can handle it all. So adding new features in is nothing more than building out the data constructs. And in this case, DynamoDB and RDS, again, dead simple to make sure that we manage, as long as the data architect's doing their job and making sure you have a model right? But as they build on these more of these add-ons, they found out that automation of all this was the hardest part for them. Some of their new clients that they were signing on had some regulatory requirements, let's call them, which basically said, we don't want to be shared in a shared environment with any of the other clients, which as an ISV, not the thing you want to hear necessarily, but you know what's going to happen with some of your special clients. So how do we automate replicating this without having to rebuild it all every time? Built it out really simply. All it is Lambdas and code deployment. So code pipeline took care of it for you. They just had to have another account set up for it, dedicated to the client. The interesting part was when they started getting into the one piece that they didn't want to touch originally. For those of you that know the healthcare business, EHRs, electrical health record systems, just say they're hard to deal with. They have their own little ecosystem of how you connect with them, how do you interact with them, and how you integrate with them. The most popular of these groups is probably Epic, and they are notoriously hard to work with. Building that integration took most of the beginning of this year. We finally finished it. It's done. We're moving on to something else. But those integrations are going to enable that migration from that traditional monolith of Trace to getting into a cloud native platform. As more and more of our ISVs and our big providers out there are starting to host their products in the cloud, all of these health tech innovators, fintech innovators, the technology innovators of the world are going to have to follow suit, or we won't be able to keep up. VYNE's now at that point, and they're starting to do that, start that process. I was making sure because I thought I only had 4 slides in this. As you can tell, I keep my presentations nice and sweet and short. Is this pretty good so far? Good content? Decent story for you? All right. I'm going to go back to 1 point for you then real quick before I close out and start getting into Q&A a little bit for this one. This guy. Worked for, let's call it 4 different consulting groups now in the last 10 years. My entire career has been about change, right? Kind of started that. In the last 10 years, because I've had so many different groups that I've worked with, I've tried to create a different way that consulting groups engage and partners engage with clients. And this revolves entirely around how AWS likes to work customer-centric with you. We cannot, as consultants, be good conservators of a relationship, asking everybody to pay for advisory. Let's just say I've had a lot of executive arguments with different consulting groups and PE firms, for that matter, about this point. Business advisory, sure. McKinsey's out there, they're going to stay forever. Don't worry about it. Business advisory will always be there to help you. Technical advisory should be part of your contract and part of your process, not something that stands alone. Anytime you think you need advisory services, what you're really missing is somebody asking that one question right up front. Why are we doing this? And what do we want to get out of it? Focus on that and everything else will fall into place. All right, enough of me on the soapbox. From a broader story standpoint, how does this resonate with you guys? Who's been in the same position so far? I'll take some hands. Trying to build something new. Questions about how to go about it? Getting buy-in from the board even? I'll tell you that those conversations are usually more about your presentation than they are about the content. As you can tell, I've got a fantastic marketing team that loves to work on great graphics. They make me look good. I advise you get somebody on the marketing team to help you out if you ever need to sell a project upwards. Yeah, absolutely. So Refine as a platform is first and foremost a typical SaaS platform, multi-tenancy. So you get all the same things that you would get anywhere else, right? Identity management, a good data platform, in this case, Dynamo and RDS. Identity management, frankly, we just used AWS Identity and then implemented with Ping Identity as well as with Okta to handle consumer-grade identities when they needed it, right? You need to have options when it comes down to that stuff. Otherwise, partners aren't going to work with you. Building, right? Once you have that, the biggest thing the architects worked out was the API integrations. What is our API architecture going to look like? What's public, what's private, and how are we going to manage those connections? Because that's going to define our entitlement process. So when people subscribe to the solution, we need to make sure we can be able to provide the keys to access the data they need and only the data they're supposed to get. So once we had the APIs done, entitlements came. From there, you have a SaaS solution. Then it's function and feature development. Those function and features are whatever you need to build. In this case, a focus on really not a sexy project in this case, which is part of the reason I kind of fluffed over it. It was just authorization management for Medicare and Medicaid. That was the MVP. As long as we had that in, that helped the doctor's offices go from weeks to getting authorization to treat a patient to hours, which anybody in healthcare, right? That's huge. If we can get past the paperwork part of it, which mind you, Medicare and Medicaid, up until this point, ESMD was the new thing that made it so that we could actually integrate with an API with the government. Huge, because up until then it was faxing, actual faxing. To this day, people are still faxing to get authorization for Medicare and Medicaid. So getting that in place was the big thing. That's what we sold those first 2 clients on. Beyond that, it was denials management. Denials management is one of the heaviest communication management pieces in any healthcare system that you're going to get into. You send in this pre-authorization process, they say no. They tell you they need 6 more things. You send them 6 more things, they say you sent the wrong ones, even though they're exactly what you told them they told you you needed. You send them more. That communication management and managing that log of trail, because all of that is HIPAA compliant documentation, having it in a secure solution was our second piece. So from a technology perspective, really basic. Lambdas, APIs, and some very basic stuff that we put the interface through static pages on a S3 bucket that were provided up through Lambdas. Simple as that, right? Your kind of typical, how do we make a very thin cloud native application solution or a SaaS application? That pattern's well documented. We're well known at this point. It's building the features and functions that's the hardest part and making them scalable. As a note, right now, we're actually about to roll off that client. We're finishing up unit test coverage. Mid-year last year, June, we had 0% coverage on unit testing. Well, documented. There was some unit testing, but 0% documented unit test. In November, we had 92%. As of today, we're at 98. That's insanity. Going from that, typically when you take a product like this, it's like a year and a half of trying to get that coverage done. I love my team. Bragging for them a little bit for that. That answer your question pretty well? Identity management, Lambdas, S3, some step functions for managing more branching functions. We do have 2 EC2 processes running out there, but they're really just the Lambda functions that tended to run too long. So it was easier to run them in Q out of SQS and SNS out of an EC2 bucket than it is to run them on a Lambda. Less expensive that way. Kind of. So this, it was not running on AWS. So before this, they didn't have anything in AWS. I'll go back a little bit on the slides here for you. So this Trace product is a series of 6 to 20 servers that's installed at the hospital or healthcare group in their data center, right next to the EHR, because it requires low latency between them right now. And it's required to be installed there. So yes, it was installed on-prem. No, we could not translate it directly. The original ask of migrating this product directly to AWS, let's just say it was unfeasible. We could have done it. It just wouldn't have helped anybody. It would have helped my revenue line. That's about it. Yeah. Ooh. You're getting into one of my favorite conversations. All right. Yeah. How many consultants do I have in the room real quick? A decent group. Okay. I'm not going to go into my full diatribe on this, but I will happily sit down with you and talk about this later on too. Basically, the question is fixed fee versus time and materials and how you estimate that and ensure that you don't have overrun in your projects. And I'm only going to take a minute on this to make sure anybody else has any questions we can go into. It all comes down to your architects. When it comes down to it, fixed fee puts the onus of risk on you and your consulting group. Time and materials puts the onus on the client, defining good outcomes and ensuring that they have solid deliverables in there that you're promising to deliver in the time and materials that you're providing is cost. That's really what you're talking about. It all comes down to how you're estimating and how you're calculating that margin. This is one of the hardest things for small consulting firms to do. And part of the reason why you see folks like CDW and Accenture charge $500 to $600 an hour for their consultants is because they have to cover all the back office that does all the calculation for you. Definitely sit down though. Grab my contact info if at the very least, and I can help you out with some of that. We just got acquired in a year ago, December, my last firm right now. They were a fixed fee firm. We were a time and materials firm. I've been having those conversations nonstop for the last 12 months. Please. What I would tell you is, if you're not walking alongside your client, you're leading them by the nose, which never works out for anybody. So having a partnership with your clients is of the utmost critical nature, because when it comes down to it, especially with new logos that you're engaging with, this is your time to build personal rapport that translates to your organizational rapport. And without getting that, you're never going to get the second project. And we all know that common statement in consulting, your best future clients are your current clients. So having that partnership with them and letting them tell you everything they need, but then setting good expectations and boundaries based on that is what it's all about. And that's the estimating process, and it's by large. Setting expectations and boundaries. Frankly, if any of you are married, that's really good advice for your marriage too. Oh, come on, only one chuckle? God, they have two. Okay, there we go. Anyone else? Like I said. The monolith? Oh, no. Migrating that monolith is the expectation we set to the board. That monolith will never migrate directly to a cloud. The architecture of it, the complexity of it would mean that it is a lift and shift migration, which means it would cost 3 times as much to run as it does right now to make it so that the hospitals have to run it. So it would cost VYNE more money. Their contract costs would triple at minimal, just to make it so that their clients could run it from the AWS or something like that. Now, don't get me wrong, AWS would love to see it. I wouldn't mind running those projects. They're really easy to do. Run something like any of the cloud migrators. I still try to say it's TSO, but I know it's not. But migration evaluator can move the whole thing over, and we could set up the networking in probably a 3-week period without any problem. But it really wouldn't be a good solution. Not yet, because it doesn't have all the features. So one of the big things that this has got is a lot of image analysis, document repository management, and solutions made for faxing and audio recording from their call centers. So those are pieces that are still in the roadmap. In fact, we have all the cards and epics built out at this point. You're talking about a 3 to 5 year project, to finish that out. Ideally, we're not going to be involved in that anymore. We've built the basis for it. We built the SaaS application. We got them monetized, and we've started transitioning everything over to their internal development teams to transition from developing trace to developing refine. That's our goal, my goal. Again, love making changes in the world. So even if I can make those little small changes and change somebody's direction a little bit, that's huge for me. All right, we are at time, which means I'm going to get kicked off the stage because somebody else has to get on. I appreciate everybody. If you do want to get in contact with me, greiner@converge1.com, and I will find my clicker again, which I already tossed in my pocket. Likewise,